I made a video about each Kingsguard a few months ago, and I talked about how great the Mad King's Kingsguard was before the start of the story. But in the new book, Fire and Blood, we got some new information about who were the greatest 7 members of the Kingsguard in this series. It was long before the time of the Mad King, 250 years before the start of the story. It was a very turbulent time in the 7 kingdoms. Aegon the Conqueror, who recently united the 7 kingdoms with his dragons, was now dead, and his son Aenys was a horrible ruler who died young. Some of the lords and the small folk were beginning to challenge the Targaryens' rule, since the Conqueror was dead and the dominant religion in the 7 kingdoms was preaching against Targaryens, believing them to be abominations. The faith of the 7 was firmly against incestuous marriages, which happens to be an ancient custom for the Targaryens. Aegon was married to both of his sisters, and while Aenys married a lady of House Valyrian, Aenys had his son and daughter married, which angered the faith. Instead of the crown passing down to Aenys' firstborn son, his half-brother Maegor forcibly took it for himself and began a war against the faith or anyone who questioned him. Maegor's own family was against him, since he stole the throne from them. He was responsible for 2 of his nephews' deaths. Lucky for the realm, Maegor the Cruel didn't live very long either, and the crown rightfully passed down to his last surviving nephew, the young Jaehaerys, since Maegor was never able to have children of his own. It was Jaehaerys' first Kingsguard that would go down as the greatest Kingsguard, and this isn't just some speculating either. George Martin straight up writes, "Never did a Targaryen possess a Kingsguard who could equal the boy king's first 7, and we all know that after the Targaryens, the Kingsguard weren't really anything to think of. I wish there was some official art to show off these badass characters as I talk about them, but unfortunately, some of these guys are new to this world, since Fire and Blood only came out recently, and it isn't like there's a whole lot written about them to inspire some concept art, so I guess I'll just improvise here. King Jaehaerys and his advisors had a lot of work to do from the start. The Faith still had their problems with the Targaryens, and they had a lot of control over the people. There were also the men who served under Maegor the Cruel who needed to be dealt with the king's justice. The former Kingsguard members, who committed horrible acts under Maegor's orders, were given the choice of death or to join the Night's Watch. 2 were already dead, and 4 decided to take the black. 1 demanded a trial by combat. Jaehaerys was just crowned, so he didn't have a Kingsguard to fight his battle for him, so he planned on fighting the man himself. From the crowd stepped up a knight named Sir Giles Morrigan to fight in King Jaehaerys' place. Giles' uncle was a man named Daemon the Devout, who was the captain of the Faith's military. He died fighting Maegor the Cruel years earlier. Giles Morrigan wanted to prove his family's loyalty to House Targaryen by fighting for Jaehaerys. He was more than enough to take out the old Kingsguard member in the trial by combat. Jaehaerys named Giles Morrigan as the first member of his Kingsguard and his Lord Commander. The Faith would come to accept Jaehaerys since he wasn't like his weak father or his cruel uncle. He was showing signs of a great ruler at a young age, and would grow up to arguably be the greatest king. It's customary for the leader of the Faith, called the High Septon, to anoint a new king, and during the celebration, lords came swarming to swear fealty to Jaehaerys. One of these men was Sir Joffrey Doggett, nicknamed the Red Dog. He was one of Maegor's enemies who would place Daemon the Devout as the leader of the Faith's military force. Fighting for the Faith was outlawed by Maegor, so many were sent to the wall who survived the war by Jaehaerys. Joffrey Doggett was expected to either be killed or join his friends at the wall, but he was instead offered a position as a member of the Kingsguard. Joffrey drew his sword, making some believe he meant to attack the king, but he bent the knee and placed his sword at his feet, then began to cry because of Jaehaerys' mercy. But still, 5 slots needed to be filled to protect the royal family. Jaehaerys' mother, and Aenys' widow, was remarrying into House Baratheon, so she suggested that during the wedding, the fighters participating in the tourney be tested to show if they're worthy of filling the empty positions. Jaehaerys agreed that this audition process would work nicely, but wanted the fighters to win a white cloak on foot in a melee instead of on horse, jousting, since that's just an unpractical way of fighting outside of tourneys. Many lords and knights gathered for this huge event that would be remembered as the Golden Wedding. This test would be known as the War for the White Cloaks, and go on for the entire 7 days of the festivities. Out of the 5 chosen to join Giles Morrigan and Joffrey Doggett, only 1 was of noble birth, Sir Lawrence Roxton from a house in the Reach. 2 were sworn swords, Sir Victor the Valiant from the household of Lord Royce of Runestone, a house in the Vale, and Sir William the Wasp, who served Lord Smallwood of Acorn Hall, a house in the Riverlands. While most in melees fight with a sword, the youngest champion out of these 5, named Pate the Woodcock, fought with a spear. This made some question if he truly was a knight, but he was so talented that Joffrey Doggett knighted him himself to end all the talks. The last champion was this old man who was bald, almost toothless, missing an eye, and covered in scars. His name was Sam Good of Sour Hill, and claims to have fought in 100 battles. After saying how many battles he fought in, Sour Sam went on to say, "And never you mind on what side, that's for me and the gods to know." His speed and vicious skill made everyone overlook his old age of 63. We don't hear a lot about this Kingsguard's feats, since Fire and Blood had to cover 150 years of fake history. but their most badass moment happens in Dragonstone. Jaehaerys was crazy enough to marry his younger sister Alysanne when they were teenagers, which was extremely dangerous since they just recently ended the conflict with the Faith. Jaehaerys' mother wanted a safer, less controversial marriage, but that teenage angst made him go against his mother's wishes. Their mother Alyssa and her new husband, Rhaegar Baratheon, sailed to Dragonstone to separate the young king and queen before the realm found out. Lord Rhaegar was not so easily cowed. Blunt and to the point, he asked only if the marriage had been consummated. "Tell me true, your grace. Was there a wedding? Did you claim her maidenhood?" "No," the king replied. "She is too young." At that, Lord Rhaegar smiled. "Good, you are not wed." He turned to the knights who had accompanied him from King's Landing. "Separate these children gently, if you please. Escort the princess to Sea Dragon Tower and keep her there. His grace should accompany us back to the Red Keep." But as his men moved forward, the 7 knights of Jaehaerys' Kingsguard stepped up and drew their swords. "Come no closer," warned Sir Giles Morrigan. "Any man who lays a hand upon our king and queen shall die today." Lord Rhaegar was dismayed. "Sheath your steel and move aside," he commanded. "Have you forgotten? I am the king's hand." "Aye," old Sour Sam answered, "but we're the Kingsguard, not the Handsguard, and it's the lad who sits the chair, not you." Rhaegar Baratheon bristled at Sir Samgood's words and answered, "You are 7. I have 100 swords behind me. A word from me and they will cut you to pieces." "They might kill us," replied young Pate the Woodcock, brandishing his spear. "But you'll be the first to die, my lord. You have my word upon that." The 7 members of the Kingsguard stood their ground against 50 soldiers, if these numbers are to be believed, and Jaehaerys ended up getting his way. This conflict ended with no fight, but he had to convince the followers of the Faith of 7 that Targaryens are exceptions to that no incest rule. Still, few opposed this tradition in secret. Jaehaerys and Alysanne would frequently travel throughout the 7 kingdoms, and on one of these trips, Alysanne was attacked by 3 septas, who tend to a pool of holy water. They believed she would pollute the water, so their solution was killing the queen. The queen's companions shielded her long enough for Sir Joffrey and Sir Giles to hear her screams and come to the rescue. The first Kingsguard to die would be Sir William the Wasp. The 13-year-old Princess Arya ran away with the oldest and most powerful dragon, Balerion, which could have meant serious problems for House Targaryen. Rumors came in from Essos of a large monster near Pentos eating a bunch of sheep. Jaehaerys sent men to investigate, with William the Wasp leading the party. This whole story was just a lie thieves were spreading so they could easily steal sheep without people looking for them. William and his men were ambushed and killed in 56 AC. He served as a member of the Kingsguard for 7 years. 3 years later, in 59 AC, an illness from the east called the Shivers swept over Westeros. But with King's Landing being so heavily populated for such a small amount of land, it affected this city the worst. Sour Sam and Sir Victor the Valiant didn't survive the Shivers. Jaehaerys would become the longest reigning king, sitting on the Iron Throne for 55 years before dying. The old king would go through many Kingsguard members during his long 55-year reign, but no one would compare to the first 7 members. Like this video, the last couple I made had been inspired by the new world-building book Fire and Blood, so if you want to check out the lore behind the different seas, you can click or tap on your screen to watch that. Thanks for watching this one, guys. I'll see y'all later.